Good morning, kids. Welcome back to the Boxcar Children, book number 3, The Yellow House Mystery, Chapter 9, Almost Starving. After the day in the lumber camp, the morning seemed to come in no time. Then men were awake and working before the sun. When everyone was dressed, Joe took the children to find the boss. I wonder if you have ever heard of a man named Bill McGregor, he said to the boss. He's lost, said Benny. Lost? How old a man? About 70 now, answered Joe. He's been gone for many years, but we just found a letter saying he might have gone on Bear Trail. This is part of Bear Trail, said the boss. Yes, I know, said Joe. That's why we came. This Bill was a very strong man, so I thought maybe he had worked in lumber camps. Well, I'll ask my men, said the boss. I'll find a way to let you know if I hear anything. We're going to stop at the old village, said Joe. If you hear anything about this man, send someone down by canoe. I'll pay for it. I guess not, laughed the boss. Too bad if I couldn't help you out. I'll be glad to let you know anything I hear. You have 2 looks and a carry before you get to Old Village Lake. So let's think back, kids. 2 looks. That means going around a bend in the water, something you can't see as you go around. And then a carry is when they do the portage. Remember I taught you that French word, portage, means to carry the canoe on your back. The voyageurs did that back in the days of the fur trade. Cookie began to ring the bell. Breakfast! Soon the men were eating great plates of quick bread. But Cookie had made beautiful brown pancakes for the visitors. They ate them with butter and brown sugar. I'll help paddle today, Henry, said Alice. Thanks, said Henry. We'll get along faster that way. After breakfast, everything was packed up again and put in the canoes. The children did not forget to thank Cookie and the kind lumber boss. Very soon they were on their way down to the lake. The day was beautiful. They saw 2 interesting things. They paddled around the first look and saw a moose swimming to shore as fast as he could. Around the next look, they saw a beautiful deer standing in the bushes. I like going around those looks, cried Benny. I'm glad we came. What's next, Joe? Well, said Joe with a funny smile, soon we'll get out and carry the canoes. He winked at Jessie. Can I carry one? Asked Benny. No, certainly not, said Joe. Henry and Alice will carry one with things still in it. That will be right side up, and then I will carry the other one upside down on my head. You and Violet will have to carry some bags. Not as much fun as you think. You see, this lake stops ahead, but there's a very big lake not far from here. That's the last lake for us. Henry and Joe soon pulled both canoes up on the shore. Alice took one end of a canoe under her arm. Henry took the other. Benny laughed and laughed as Joe put the other canoe upside down on his head and walked off down the path. Benny and Violet came after with the bags. It was not very far, and Alice was glad because the canoe was very heavy. Everyone sat down by the next lake to rest. What a beautiful day this is, cried Jessie. She could not help it. The lake was the biggest one she'd ever seen. Well, all of them for that matter. The water was very blue and the trees were very dark green. Let's rest a long time, said Joe. We have a long canoe trip ahead of us. There are not many good places to land for dinner. But at last he got up and they were on their way again. This time they did not paddle out to the middle. It was too far. So that tells you what about the lake? If it's too far out to the middle, it's very large. Stay near land, Henry, said Joe. Then we won't have so far to paddle. But when he said this, he did not know how lucky they were going to be. The two canoes were going along smoothly. Nobody thought of rain. Suddenly, Joe looked up at the sky. Look up, Henry, Joe called. Just at that minute, the wind began to blow. Ooh! All of a sudden, the smooth lake turned very black. Soon, the small waves were all over the lake, and big ones were beginning. For one long minute, Joe stopped paddling and looked sharply at the shore. Get to shore, Henry. Just as fast as you can. Land between those two large trees. He had to shout, for the wind made a terrible noise. Now, do you guys know why it's so important to get to shore when there's a storm? Well, I think we want to make sure there's no lightning, right? That would be very dangerous to be in a boat on the water if there was lightning. They turned both canoes. By now, they could hardly sit up. Alice paddled without a word. I think that means she's probably very much concentrating on her job if they say she paddled without a word. Henry's canoe went first. Then it began to rain. The rain fell so fast that in 1 minute they were soaked all the way through, but they thought of nothing but getting to shore. You can make it, Henry, yelled Joe. There's room for us both to land. Get over to one side. Henry and Alice paddled under the branches of the two trees and drove their canoe up into a very small opening. Get out quickly, cried Alice. Pull our canoe out of the way so Joe can land too. They did so. Even little Violet helped, and then they all waved at Joe. Okay, he shouted as he began to paddle straight in. Just then a big wave hit his canoe sideways and washed the bags of food and dishes into the lake. Never mind, he yelled. Let them go. Benny, sit still. Then, with one strong push, he drove his canoe up beside Henry's. He looked at his young wife, who had turned very white. What does that mean? If she's turning very white, the blood's draining out of her face, she's scared. Thank goodness, said Alice. We're all safe. She put her arm around Violet, who was shaking with fright. We'll have to do something right away, said Henry, taking one look at his gentle little sister. We're really in a fix. All our food is gone. Are we gonna starve, Joe? asked Benny. Starve? No, but I guess we're gonna be very hungry. Just almost starve? Let's not stand here in the rain talking, said Jessie. We still have our tents and our blankets. We still have our shelter half. We must think of some way to get Violet dry and warm. Do you remember Violet was so sick in the first book and she had to be bundled up in her bed for a long time? She must have fragile health. I'm all right, said Violet, but she didn't look all right, and she was shaking. Henry and Joe looked around. They could see nothing but trees and bushes. There was no path. There was no open place. Clearly, no campers had been here before. Not a very good place to land or make a camp, said Henry, very worried. It's all woods and bushes, but maybe we could cut some bushes and trees down. We still have our axe. Thank goodness for that, said Henry. Let's have the axe. Don't cut here, said Joe. The ground is too wet to make a camp. Let's try to find a better place. You go that way, Henry, and I'll go this. Hunt around, but don't go too far and don't get lost. Before long, they both came crashing back through the bushes and trees, but now Joe was smiling. Water, he shouted. There's a spring up there. And quite a good place. We can make it do. We'll have to. We won't need to cut down many bushes, and there's room for the tents and a fire pit. How can we build a fire in the rain, Joe? Don't forget, we have the half shelter. You bring in some big stones and some dry wood, and you'll see we'll be able to do it. But all the wood is wet. Not on the underside it isn't, said Henry. Look, Jessie, with that axe. As fast as Jessie could cut down bushes, Alice pulled them away. Joe and Henry put up Mr. Hill's shelter half as fast as they could. Soon Joe had a fire going. He made Violet sit before it, putting a blanket over her knees. Thank you, Joe, said the little girl. The fire feels so nice and warm. She wasn't shaking anymore. Good, cried Henry. That shelter half is wonderful. It keeps the wind off the fire, too. Can I go back to the canoe and see if I can find any food, please? Good boy, said Joe. A fine idea. You may grow up to be a Maine guide yet. I'll go with you, Benny, said Alice suddenly, after a look at Joe. We might even get a hold of one of the bags. Off they went while Joe and Henry put up the tents. The big trees kept a lot of the rain off, and the insides of the tent were quite dry. Jessie took the blanket rolls inside before she took off the straps. Anyway, she said, we have a warm, dry place to sleep, even if we don't have anything to eat. Now, this is a good time to sit and think about how fortunate you guys are all to have a warm place to be. So important to keep warm, to be healthy. Joe was thinking. He was worried. He knew it would be hard for the children to go a whole day and night without eating. Meanwhile, two people were really having fun, Alice and Benny. They could see the one bag of food as it lay under the water, not far from shore. The wind was blowing so hard that every wave brought that bag nearer to them. If I could just get a hold of it! It has potatoes and tin cans. Let's have the fishing rod. You'd break it if you tried to use the fishing rod, said Alice. Here's a stick. Please let me walk in the lake, Alice. I'm as wet can be already. I don't have very far to go. Well, all right, said Alice. It isn't very deep, but go easy now, Benny. What a funny feeling that was. Benny stepped into the lake very slowly. He went in up to his knees. He had a big stick in one hand, and he held on to the branch of the tree with the other. He tried and tried to get a hold of the bag. He did not give up until he'd hooked the stick into the handle. Then he pulled carefully. The bag almost floated. Then he caught it with his hand and pulled it to shore. Oh, Benny dear, cried Alice. She was so glad she almost cried. How glad Joe will be. They both took hold of the bag and pulled it back to camp. Look here, shouted Benny. Potatoes! Wonderful potatoes, everyone said. They opened the bag and took out what was left. Their flour was gone. The salt was gone. The sugar was gone. But there were potatoes and cans of milk. No dishes. They were all in another bag. Never mind dishes, cried Violet. Just think of having potatoes, Benny. We can cook potatoes without dishes. It was long past noon, and everyone began to work. Roll the potatoes into the fire right here, said Joe. They will burn, but never mind. We have something to eat. We can put spring water in the milk and drink that too. How can we put spring water into a can of milk? It's full already. Henry had an idea. He rushed off to his own canoe. Soon he was back with the water pail and his big knife. Now we've got a dish, he said. We can put the milk and the water in this pail, and we'll open the milk cans with this knife. Then the cans will be all empty. Then we'll use them for cups, said Jessie. Well, anyway, we're not starving, just almost starving. That is the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called Potato Camp. See you next time.